guys, David O'Sullivan here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my review of the new Kathryn Bigelow film, Detroit. So in case you don't know already, Detroit basically tells the story of the Detroit riots and the rebellion that went down in the summer of 1967 in America at the time. And going to this film, I was looking forward to seeing it because it's a Kathryn Bigelow film, and obviously she's directed films such as 0-30 and The Hurt Locker. She's a really great director, Academy Award winning director. Also Point Break. A lot of people forget that's a Kathryn Bigelow film, but I absolutely love Point Break. But obviously she's most well known for these kind of serious, more dramatic, real world, kind of true story films like 0-30 and The Hurt Locker. And this is kind of like the third film in an unofficial true story film trilogy. Kind of like Peter Berg, she's become known for kind of doing these films based on real events, and Detroit very much fits into that as well. Going to this film, I'd heard a lot of real positive buzz. You know, people were saying it was like one of the best films of the year because it'd be one of the first films in contention for like Best Picture at the Oscars. It's going to get a lot of awards from award season. And although I don't think this film is like one of the best films of the year, I don't think it's, you know, like Oscar worthy necessarily, I do think it was a really great film, and it definitely deserves all the praise and recognition it's getting. For me, I think it was a really great film, but I did have some little problems with it that kind of held it back for me from being like really absolutely, you know, fantastic. But first I'll get into my positives, because there's a lot to really like about this film, mainly the performances from the cast. All the actors in this film do an absolutely incredible job, because obviously this is a true story film, it's based on real events, this is real people, and never for one second do you think, oh, we're watching actors giving performances. And there's a lot of famous actors in this film. There's John Boyega, obviously from Star Wars, there's Anthony Mackie, who's, you know, the Falcon. But despite that, whenever you see these people on screen, it never feels like you're watching famous actors in a movie. It very much feels like you're watching real people in slices of real life, because the film was done in a way where it made it feel like you're watching real events. It didn't feel like a glamorized, Hollywoodized movie at all. And even though there's actors in there that have faces you recognise, they're never kind of filmed in a way where it's like, oh, look at this big famous actor. Everyone's just, you know, filmed in a way where it's like you're just watching real people. And I really appreciated that. And also, like I said, the performances were absolutely terrific all round. And although I don't think this film's necessarily got a shot of winning Best Picture or Best Director or anything like that, I definitely think it's got a shot of getting some awards for the acting, because the performances in this film were flat out extraordinary. Obviously, a lot of people are really kind of, you know, putting a lot of praise on Will Poulter, and rightly so, because he is absolutely amazing in this film. And I've been a big Will Poulter fan for a long time. Obviously, you know, British guy, and a lot of people don't realise he's British because he's really great at doing accents. You know, he's American in this, obviously, and you know, I've been following his work ever since I saw him in Chronicles of Narnia as a little kid, ever since Son of Rambo, I think, as well. But I remember when I saw him in Chronicles of Narnia, and ever since then he's been popping up in more and more films over the years, and he's just gotten better and better, and he's just been given more opportunities to show how good of an actor he really is. And this film, above all, he really got the chance to kind of show everyone how good of an actor he really is, because he's been in some films before that he's been really great in, but they've been not so great films, like, you know, With the Millers, for example, wasn't that great. He's never really had the opportunity before to show how good of an actor he really is until now. In Detroit, he really gets a real meaty role that he can really kind of dig his teeth into as an actor, and he really knocks it out of the park with his performance, because it's quite tough to watch at times, but he does a fantastic job of really making us believe in the character he's played. We don't for one second, you know, even though we recognise Will Poulter and we were fully aware he's an actor giving a performance, it very much feels like he's a real guy, and he does such a great job in that role that we as an audience absolutely hate him, and we just really want to punch him in the face, and he does a terrific job. So I really think he's got a strong chance of getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor, because he did a great job. It's still a bit too early to say, because we're only like just over halfway through the year, but he did a fantastic job. And the performances all round. John Boyega's great. He's not got a massive role in the movie as the trailers would suggest. The trailers make it seem like it's the John Boyega show and he's the star of the film. Not really. He has a pivotal role to play, but he's not really got a massive part in the movie. He's not like the main star by any means. But, you know, all the others are great. Anthony Mackie pops up, he's really good. But Algee Smith, I'm not really aware of him. I think he's an up-and-coming young actor. But he really impressed me with this film, and he almost had a kind of Will Smith-like quality to him. You know, he had that kind of screen presence, he had that look that almost kind of reminded me of Will Smith in a weird way, and I really feel like he's got a real bright future ahead of him, because he really stood out and really impressed me in this film, and I think he did a really great job. He's kind of like the lead protagonist in a way, and a lot of the film revolves around him, and he's in this band and he really wants just to make it as a singer, but there's all this shit going on around him that keeps getting in his way. And yeah, he really impressed me. I really liked him in the movie. I think he did a really great job, and I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing more of him in future films, because he did a really great job in this, and I think he's got a real bright future ahead of him. And also, of course, I can't do this review and not talk about the direction by Kathryn Bigelow. Again, she's a really great director, and she does a really great job with this film, because when you're watching it, it doesn't feel like, as I said, like a Hollywoodized, you know, overly dramatic movie. It very much feels like you're watching real events, and there's a lot of kind of real world kind of archive footage that's interspliced throughout the film, and I really like that, and it was done so seamlessly. It wasn't jarring, it didn't take you out of the film at all. It often cut back and forth between the actual footage of the film and the real archive footage, and it was done in such a seamless way that it just, so there were often times when you couldn't really tell, and if it wasn't for the difference in aspect ratio and picture quality, you probably wouldn't have been able to tell which was real and which was kind of the film. It was just so seamlessly meshed together and woven together in that respect, and I think it was really well done. And as I said, how it was actually shot and directed, it very much felt documentarian in terms of how it was directed. It had a handheld feel to it, an almost Paul Greengrass kind of feel to it. I mean, not shaky cam, but it was kind of very handheld, you know. And I think that really worked and really added to the kind of the chaotic, kind of frenzy, kind of nature of what was going on. It really felt like it was on edge all the time, and the camera was handheld, it was constantly moving, it was constantly on edge, you were constantly on edge watching it. Really much felt like you were there in the heat of this night, in the midst of this crazy chaotic events that were going down, and the handheld, almost documentarian style kind of camera work really added to that and really helped it feel even more kind of intense and chaotic, and I really liked that. And talking about tension, this movie was also very intense. Although the trailers will make it look like it's more about the riots of Detroit in general, it's really about this one isolated incident in the Algiers Motel, and that portion of the film was just so intense. It became almost like a horror film at times. There were many times throughout that sequence where it was actually quite difficult to watch, but you were just on edge, and it was just riveting stuff. It was, like I said, it was almost horrific at times, but you were just like on the edge of your seat, and it was gripping, really riveting, intense stuff. Really great. But then this also kind of leads me on to my negatives. My biggest problem with this movie is that they kind of focused a lot on the Algiers Motel incident, and I didn't have anything necessarily against that, but the film wasn't just about that. It was also about the riots and the rebellion in general, what was going on in Detroit on a larger scale, and that's kind of like what happens in the first act of the film, and also they kind of wrap it up at the end in the final act is about kind of the broader events and what's going on in the larger scheme of things. But that middle portion of the film, it's almost, I think, an hour just in the Algiers Motel, and I think it was an incredibly well done sequence, and I didn't have anything against the length of that sequence or anything, but it almost felt like they wanted to make a film just about that one isolated incident and event, and I was totally fine with that, but at the same time they kind of bookended that with, you know, trying to tell the story of the riots in Detroit, and it just felt like they were trying to have their cake and eat it. It almost felt like they were trying to do two things at once, and it didn't always work for me, it didn't always mesh together, because they were trying to tell a film about the riots in Detroit, but then they were also trying to tell a film about this very isolated incident in this event at the Algiers Motel, and I don't think they always both meshed together well, because it kind of felt like they were trying to do these two different things both at the same time. At first act, I found it quite tough to get into, because they kind of throw you into it, and it was quite hard for me to tell, okay, what's going on, why is this happening, what's going on now. And as soon as they got into that Algiers Motel stuff, I think the film really picked up and it really found its stride. But that first act was, for me, was a little iffy. It was a little kind of tough for me to get into it and really kind of get invested, because I was like, wait, what's going on, what's happening here, like I really need to have some context here. And then as soon as it focused on the Algiers Motel, and it became a film almost about this kind of isolated incident, it became an almost contained suspense thriller. That's where the film really shined. And then the final act, it was kind of stepping away from that and trying to wrap it up and telling the story and how it all wraps up on a larger scale. So it's like it was a little bit all over the place for me. It was like they should have focused on one of those two things instead of trying to do a story about the riots and what was going on in Detroit on the whole, and telling the story of that isolated incident at the Algiers Motel. And they were trying to do both those two things at the same time, and it didn't always work for me. And also I had some issues as far as pacing was concerned. I never lost interest, I never got bored, but the film did feel very long. It is quite a long film. I think it was almost kind of 2 hours, 20 minutes, 2.5 hours, but it felt really long at times. The Algiers Motel part of the film, I think, was the best part, but then there were other times where it really felt like it was starting to drag, and especially as it got into that final act as well, I really started to feel the length of the film by that point. It felt like it was just going on and on. I was like, oh my god, when is this going to wrap up here? It wasn't a big issue for me, but I think because of how the film was structured, with that second act being all about the Algiers Motel, and then the first and final acts being about what was going on a broader scale, it kind of affected the pacing of the film for me, where it really kind of slowed down and really kind of dragged in parts, and it did feel a whole lot longer than it was. So I feel like there were some issues as far as pacing was concerned as well. But other than that, I think this was a really great film. Like I said, I had some issues as far as pacing and as far as how they approached telling the story, but other than that, I think this was a really well directed film. I think Kathryn Bigelow did a fantastic job in telling this story and really kind of narrowing in on that isolated incident and the events that went down in the Algiers Motel, and really kind of putting across just the horror and just tension, what it must have felt like to have been in that position at that time in America. And I think it was a really well directed film, phenomenally acted, like Academy Award worthy performances really all round. Fantastically acted film. Like the performances really helped to elevate this film for me, because I think it was really well directed. I love what Kathryn Bigelow did with the film, but the performances were really kind of the shining parts of this film for me, namely Will Poulter, but Algee Smith as well, John Boyega. Everyone in the cast did an incredible job. Real kind of Oscar worthy performances for me, and yeah, I thought this was a really great film. It's not one of my favourite films of the year. I don't think it's like absolutely fantastic, flawless, masterpiece, amazing, best thing ever, but it was a really great film, and I definitely recommend going and checking it out. It's a very powerful film, quite hard to watch at times, but also a very important film that I think should be seen, and a film that, you know, people should go and watch and actually go and talk about, and it should be in conversation, because there's some things in this film that really hit you where it's like, okay, it's not as bad as that now, but it's still kind of almost like that now, so it's quite scary and quite hard to watch at times, but it's a very important film, a film that I think should be seen. But as I mentioned, I did have some problems as far as how they approach telling the story, some kind of storytelling and pacing issues for me, but overall I'm going to give Detroit 4 out of 5 stars. And there we have it, guys. I wrote up my review of Kathryn Bigelow's Detroit. Have you seen the film yet? And if so, what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this and you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to see more. And if you missed my last film review, be sure to go ahead and click over here to catch up on my last film review, or perhaps down here to catch up on another one of my recent videos. But with that said, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.